I turned off the highway just before sunset, the last rays of light brushing the ridge above the cabin. The gravel road curved through familiar trees, quiet and dry this time of year. I rolled the window down to let the cool air and mountain air always smelled cleaner up here. Like time had slowed, just for me. But when I reached the gate, something felt off. A heavy chain hung across it. New. Not the old padlock I'd used for years, but a clunky sliding bolt, secured with a hardware store lock. My fingers curled around the metal, testing it. Firm. Installed recently. I stepped back and scanned the trees. 3 cars were tucked along the shoulder. One was Damon's, unmistakably. The others, sleek, unfamiliar, blocked the edge of the gravel like they belonged. I reached into the glove box and pulled out my spare key, the old one, for the side entrance. I hadn't needed to use it in over a year. It still slid into the gate's lock without a fight. Still mine. The cabin looked the same from the outside. Porch railings I had stained myself. The window planter that never held anything but dust. But when I pushed open the door, heat and perfume met me first. Then music. Glasses clinking. Laughter. My boots made dull sounds on the hardwood. There they were. Sienna was draped across the arm of my couch, in a robe, my robe, the gray one I left here last winter. Her hair was still damp from a shower. Damon was leaning against the counter with a lowball glass in hand, laughing at something Sienna's father had just said. Her mother was flipping through a magazine. Not one of them moved. Sienna's smile flickered when she saw me. "Oh," she said, "you should have told us you were coming." No apology. No welcome. Just an edge of irritation, as though I'd interrupted something private. I set my bag down slowly, letting the zipper echo in the silence. Damon looked away first. Sienna crossed the room with purpose, her bare feet whispering across the rug. "Let's talk outside," she said, already holding the door open. The message was clear. I followed her out without a word. On the porch, the wind had picked up. She pulled the robe tighter at her waist and didn't meet my eyes. "We thought you'd still be in Florida," she said. "Damon said you weren't planning to use the place anymore." I sat on the bench by the door and looked across the porch. The hanging fern I always brought inside during the colder months was gone. The bench cushion had been replaced with something bright and floral, something Sienna would have picked. She cleared her throat. "We've kind of set things up for the weekend. Damon's parents," she caught herself. "My parents are staying until Sunday." I let her speak. Her voice was too cheerful, too rehearsed. "We were going to clean everything up. It's just, you weren't expected." Behind her through the window, I saw Damon setting wine glasses down beside a cheese plate. One of the crystal pieces I'd boxed up months ago was out on the table. My grandmother's pattern. "I'm sure you're tired after the drive," Sienna said, eyes flitting toward my bag. "Maybe it's better if you came back next week. We'll have everything tidied up by then." I didn't say no. I didn't say anything at all. I reached down, unzipped my travel bag, and took out a folded shawl, the kind I always kept for cool evenings. Then I placed the bag carefully on the porch, Swing sat beside it, and draped the shawl over my lap. "I'll wait," I said. Sienna blinked like she hadn't prepared for that answer. I watched her lips press together. Behind her, someone turned the music up. She hesitated a second longer, then stepped back inside and closed the door. I heard the latch click. I looked out toward the pines and stayed still even as the porch light flicked off. By morning, the air had turned sharp. The sky hung low, gray, and unmoved. I hadn't slept. Not much anyway. I'd taken the quilt from the storage bench and dozed upright, hearing footsteps inside long after midnight. They hadn't offered a blanket. I hadn't asked. The front door opened just after 8. Sienna stepped out, hair-pinned lips already tight. "You can't just stay out here," she said, not quite a question. "It's unsettling for the guests." I stood, slowly letting the joints in my knees speak for themselves. She crossed her arms. You're confusing things, Maureen. Damon and we've made this house part of our long-term plan. You said once you didn't want to be up here alone. I looked past her into the window. A photo of her family posed on the back deck sat on the shelf where my wedding picture used to be. Sienna's father appeared behind her, holding his coffee like a prop. Why don't you let the younger generation enjoy it? He offered. Seems like the practical choice. I didn't respond. Sienna's tone shifted. This isn't going to work, okay? We've put a lot into this weekend. We've already invited people over. If you insist on staying. Her eyes narrowed. I'll have to call the police. I let that hang in the cold air between us. You're trespassing, she said flatly. That was the moment. I stepped off the porch and faced her fully. Call them, I said, calm and clear. I'd like them to explain who owns the deed, and while they're at it, I can show them the account that still pays the property taxes. Her face changed just for a second. Not fear, not shame, just calculation. She didn't say anything. I turned and walked around the side of the house where the flower bed used to be. The lilies were gone, replaced by ornamental rocks. I didn't recognize the new pattern. But the soil was still mine. I opened the side door with the same key I'd always had and stepped inside. It didn't take long. Around mid-morning, a county cruiser eased up the gravel drive. The tires crunched to a stop beside the porch, and a deputy stepped out. Young, polite, steady in his movements. I watched from the hallway as Sienna rushed to greet him. Voice already soft, already injured. I didn't know what else to do. She said, her hands folding together like a stage actress. She showed up out of nowhere. She's confused. This isn't good for her. I waited. The deputy asked if I was willing to come outside and speak with him. I nodded and followed him to the porch. Damon stood near the railing, arms crossed. Her parents watched from the doorway, no longer smug, just still. Sienna spoke first. It's been a really hard year for her, she said. She's been forgetful. We've been managing the property so she doesn't have to worry. The deputy glanced at me. Ma'am, do you have any documentation that shows ownership? I opened my bag, removed the worn folder I kept clipped with a binder ring, and handed it to him. He flipped through the contents. Deed, utility bills, tax receipts, all with my name, all current, fully paid. He looked at Sienna. This property belongs to Ms. Alex. There's no indication of transfer or shared title. Unless there's a legal dispute pending, there's no trespassing involved here. Sienna's mouth opened slightly, but no words followed. Her father cleared his throat, but didn't speak. The deputy handed the documents back. If you're all staying here under her roof, I'd recommend working things out respectfully. He nodded to me before returning to his cruiser. I watched his car roll down the drive, steady and final. When I turned, no one met my eyes. Damon had stepped back inside. Sienna stared out over the porch rail, her knuckles white around her coffee mug. I walked past them both through the kitchen that still smelled faintly of citrus cleaner down the hallway and into the bedroom at the end. Mine. The door still stuck a little at the top corner, just like always. I closed it quietly behind me. By the next afternoon, the house had gone strangely quiet. The music was gone, the chatter dulled to whispers. Damon spent most of the day in the den, pretending to read. Sienna busied herself in the kitchen, moving things around that didn't need moving. No one spoke to me. I took the chance to sit at the dining table with my laptop and a small stack of envelopes. Years of receipts, bank statements, tuition transfers, each one signed by me. Every payment carried my handwriting somewhere in its trail. I scrolled through the records, the final payment on Damon's car, the deposits toward their mortgage, the automatic transfers that went out like clockwork every month. The numbers climbed and blurred a quiet history of enabling disguised as generosity. $68,000 in 5 years. Maybe more if I counted the small things, plane tickets, gifts, dinners. I opened the banking app and began deleting each recurring transfer. The mortgage, the car insurance, the credit card payments, then the gym membership Sienna had charged to my account because she said once it's just easier that way. One by one, I cut the lines that connected me to their comfort. The screen went blank when the last one disappeared. When I was done, I printed the revised trust documents I'd been updating quietly since January. The ones that redirected everything back under my name alone. I left the folder open on the kitchen counter where anyone could see it. Sienna walked in while I was pouring tea. Her eyes landed on the paperwork. "What's this?" she asked, her voice too light. She skimmed the first page and let out a small laugh that didn't sound real. "You're still going to help us, right? You're just reorganizing things." I stirred my cup and watched the steam rise. She waited for an answer that didn't come. When I finally looked up, her smile was gone. That evening, I heard her in the next room, whispering to Damon the words thin and hurried. The trust folder stayed exactly where I left it. I was trimming back the lavender when Damon finally came outside. He stood at the edge of the garden with his hands in his pockets, not quite stepping into the dirt. The sky was beginning to shift gold, edging into dusk. I didn't look up. "You're overreacting," he said. I kept pruning. "You never even use this place. You've had it for 15 years? You visit maybe twice a year." Sienna and I, at least we were giving it life. I snipped another stalk and placed it neatly in the basket beside me. "I didn't come here to argue, Damon." He stepped closer. "Then what? To punish us? To make some kind of point you've always held on to things longer than you should?" I stood and faced him. "I stayed away to give you space, not to give you ownership." He shook his head. "This isn't about the house. This is about control. You don't want to let anyone else decide how things go, not even your own son." I studied his face. "If you think this is about control, then maybe you never knew me at all." He didn't respond, just stared, like he couldn't believe I wasn't bending. Later that evening, I sat at the desk in the corner of the bedroom and reviewed the paperwork again. The lawyer had sent over the final draft 2 days before I left Florida. I hadn't signed it then. I wasn't sure I needed to. Now I knew. I picked up the pen and signed the new will. One clean signature. Sienna's name, which had once been included under polite hopefulness, no longer appeared at all. Damon's remained, but with provisions, not assumptions. I placed the document into a sealed envelope and slid it into the top drawer. Down the hall, I heard cabinet doors closing harder than they needed to. Footsteps. Then the soft clink of bottles being moved around. Someone was cleaning or pretending to. I turned off the light, folded the quilt at the foot of the bed, and opened the window to let the night air in. Sienna rose early the next morning. I heard her footsteps on the stairs before the kettle even boiled. She moved with intention, like someone ready to rewrite the script. "Thought we could have a quiet moment," she said, entering the kitchen with 2 mugs. One had a floral pattern, mine, the other plain white. She placed them both on the table and smiled like yesterday hadn't happened. "We've been thinking," she began, her tone light. "This place has real potential. You know, with a few updates, we could make it an Airbnb. Bring in some income. Passive for everyone." I poured my tea. "I've never been fond of strangers in my rooms," I said. She slid the floral mug closer. "Coffee?" "It's Colombian. Damon ordered it special." I placed her cup gently back in front of her. "I prefer tea." She leaned back, exhaling through her nose, eyes scanning the room until they landed on the open folder near the end of the counter. She stood without asking and walked toward it. She flipped through the first few pages, and I saw her posture shift. This isn't what you showed us before." "No," I said. "It's not." She stopped at the revised section. Her lips moved silently, reading the words that gave the house upon my passing, not to family, but to a nature conservancy I'd supported for decades. "This says, Her voice trailed off. Her hand trembled. The mug slipped from her grasp before she realized it wasn't in her fingers anymore. It hit the floor hard. Porcelain cracked and scattered across the tile. The sound was small, but it echoed. She bent down, trying to gather the pieces too quickly, a paper towel in one hand, breath uneven. I watched her for a moment, then walked past to the sink. "I'll get the broom," I said. She didn't reply. That afternoon, I stepped outside and sat by the stone wall near the back fence. The garden was quiet. No talk of bookings or renovations, just wind and the clean rhythm of distance settling in. The house had gone still by nightfall. Sienna hadn't spoken to me since the broken cup. She'd retreated upstairs, the sound of drawers opening and closing, marking her movements like a quiet protest. Damon stayed out late, or at least long enough for me to believe he might not come back at all. When the knock came, it was soft, barely there. "Mom," he said, through the half-open door. I set down the book I hadn't been reading. "Come in." He hovered in the doorway, shoulders slumped the way he used to stand when he'd been caught lying about curfew. "I didn't know she'd gone that far," he began. "I didn't ask what that far meant. I let him speak. She told me she was redecorating, that she'd just moved the photos for a bit. I didn't realize she was replacing everything. I should have stopped it." I folded my hands. "Why didn't you?" He took a breath. "Because we needed the help. We've been behind for months. Her parents moved in to save money. I thought you wouldn't mind us using the place for a while. You always said you wanted me to enjoy it." "I said enjoy it," I said quietly. "Not take it." He looked at me, then really looked, and I saw the fatigue under his eyes. "We're drowning, Mom. The mortgage, the car, everything. I thought you'd understand." "I do," I said. "But you didn't ask." He ran a hand over his face. "You're right. I didn't." For a moment, he looked like he wanted to kneel beside the chair the way he did when he was young and sorry. But he didn't. He just stood there, staring at the floorboards, waiting for me to offer a rescue that wasn't coming. I didn't speak again, and he didn't either. When he finally left the room, the air felt lighter. Upstairs, I heard Sienna's footsteps again, hurried, purposeful. I knew what came next. By morning, the motion upstairs had turned into real packing. I heard suitcases being dragged, closet doors opening with force. Sienna didn't bother to keep her voice down. Damon said little, and when he did, it was just instructions. No more whispers, no more performances. Just the logistics of departure. I stayed downstairs, letting the space speak for itself. The kitchen held the rhythm of my routines again. I brewed tea, wiped the counter, and folded the linens that had been left bunched near the laundry room. Their noise drifted through the floorboards, anxious, unsettled. Nothing about it felt like leaving home. It felt like retreat. Sienna never looked at me when she came down. She passed through the kitchen with a tight jaw, one bag slung over her shoulder, the other thudding behind her. She knocked over a chair on the way to the door and didn't bother to pick it up. Damon righted it quietly after her. "Keys are on the table," he said. "We didn't copy them." I nodded. That was all. He stood for a long moment, fingers tapping the back of the dining chair. "Will we still see you at the baby shower?" he asked. I met his eyes. "I'll send something." He didn't argue. When the door finally shut behind them, the sound echoed. Not loud, not angry, just final. The stillness that followed wrapped around the room like a second skin. The couch was bare again. The sideboard held my books in the order I'd left them. The air no longer smelled of perfume or someone else's cooking. I walked slowly through the house, checking each room. The upstairs guest bed was stripped but clean. My closet was untouched. A few scuffs on the hallway wall were the only sign they'd been here at all. I gathered the blankets from the sofa and folded them neatly, one by one. The garden outside was catching the last of the morning sun. I opened the door, stepped out onto the porch, and let the screen swing gently shut behind me. I walked the perimeter that afternoon. The wind had picked up, brushing through the dry grasses that lined the edge of the property. I checked the old fence post by the creek and tightened the wire where it had started to sag. The rhythm of the work settled something in me. No one followed. No one called out. Back at the porch, I found the chair that had been moved into the shed and set it back where it belonged, just beside the railing, angled toward the trees. I brushed off the dust with the sleeve of my shirt, then went inside to unpack the last thing I'd brought with me, the black and white photo my father took the summer the cabin was finished. I hung it above the mantel where the mirror Sienna had installed used to be. The frame was still solid, the image still sharp. The entryway was finally clear. No more hiking boots that didn't belong, no slick shoes better suited for a city street than this terrain. Just my slippers by the door. And silence. The kind you don't have to earn or defend. I boiled water for tea and lit the fire, letting the scent of wood smoke drift through the front room. The windows were still smudged from someone's attempt at cleaning, but I didn't mind. The mountains were still there, shifting color as the sun dropped. No text buzzed. No engine rumbled up the drive. No apology knocked. I didn't need one. I sat in the chair and let the heat from the fire stretch toward me. The deed was still locked in the safe beneath the stairs. My name was still etched on the brass plate at the end of the mailbox. I hadn't moved an inch, and still, somehow, I had returned. The cabin didn't ask for anything in return. Not explanation, not compromise. Just presence. I finished the last sip of tea, placed the cup on the windowsill, and watched the last light shift across the peaks.